Why was Moses' body not found? The Exodus was Moses' time, and the Exodus is the account of the greatest escape in history, with over 2 million slaves fleeing from one of the world's most heavily guarded countries. It's an incredible story with a series of miracles, including some of the most well-known in the Bible. At the time, the Israelites were led by a man named Moses, who witnessed more miracles than Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob combined, with a series of miracles occurring one after another as God intervened on behalf of his people. Some of the miracles seem magical, like when Moses' staff turns into a snake, but most are obvious natural manipulations, as God demonstrates his power over all he created for the welfare of his people. Moses was a man who escaped death from the moment of his birth. The Pharaoh had ordered that all boys be thrown into the river. Most people are familiar with this story. The Nile River was teeming with crocodiles, and the Egyptians believed extermination was necessary to successfully decrease the numbers of Israelites. So it should have been the death of baby Moses. But like Joseph, Moses was raised in the court and received the finest education in the Egyptian university. Thanks to God's providence for the Jews, Moses was the second greatest man of the Old Testament after Abraham. However, his time as an Egyptian prince came to a sudden end when he lost his patience with one of the Egyptian overseers and killed him, after which he had to flee for his life. Moses' lifespan statistics are fascinating. He spent 40 years herding sheep in the desert at 40 years old before returning to live among the Israelites. For another 40 years, God's hand was clearly in action. Moses' encounter with the Lord through the burning bush is also fascinating, if not for the burning bush itself, then for Moses' justifications. Because he was on holy ground, God ordered Moses to take off his shoes first. Then he told Moses that he would be responsible for leading the Israelites out of Egypt. Moses presented 5 reasons why he should not do it. First, he said he was insignificant. Next, he said he was ignorant and had nothing to say. His third excuse was that he would be powerless to convince the people that God had met with him and ordered him to lead them. God said his power would be with Moses and he would perform miracles. Then Moses said he was incompetent to speak, having a speech impediment that would prevent him from stringing words together. So God provided his brother Aaron to be a spokesman. God did not choose to reveal much about the circumstances of Moses' death. There are 3 references in the Bible to Moses' death and burial, and each of these references contributes to a sense of mystery surrounding the life and death of the great prophet. It was determined that he was 120 years old at the time of his death. Moses died alone, with his back against the rock at the top of Mount Nebo, looking at the Jordan, to the land that had been promised to him but which he would never set foot on. Moses was prevented from entering the promised land because of his disobedience at the waters of Meribah Kadesh. He led the Israelites to the edge of Canaan and caught a glimpse of the land, but was not allowed to enter. God gave Moses a glimpse of the land from which he had fled Egypt near the end of his life. Moses went up Mount Nebo from the plains of Moab to the top of Pisgah, where the Lord showed him all the land. The Lord said to Moses, "Climb this mountain of Abarim and see the land I have given to the people of Israel. When you have seen it, you too will be gathered to your people, just as your brother Aaron was." God explains why Moses was not allowed to enter the promised land in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verses 51-52. "This happened because you broke faith with me in the presence of the Israelites at the waters of Meribah Kadesh in the desert of Zin, and because you did not uphold my holiness among the Israelites. Therefore you will see the land only from a distance. You will not enter the land I am giving the people of Israel." God fulfilled his promise. He showed Moses the promised land, but did not let him enter. Numbers chapter 20 records the incident at the waters of Meribah Kadesh. The Israelites arrived at the Zin desert near the end of their 40-year journey. The community turned against Moses and Aaron because there was no water. Moses and Aaron went to the tent of meeting and knelt before God. God instructed Moses and Aaron to gather the people and speak to the rock so that water would gush out. Moses gathered the men and took the staff, then, apparently in anger, said to them, "Listen, you rebels, must we bring water out of this rock for you?" Then Moses struck the rock twice with his staff, and the waters flowed abundantly. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, Because you did not trust in me to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this assembly into the land I have given them. These are the waters of Meribah, where the Israelites quarreled with the Lord and where he showed his holiness. Water gushed from the rock as God had commanded. God immediately told Moses and Aaron that because they did not trust him enough to honor him as holy, they would not lead the children of Israel into the promised land. The punishment may seem severe to us, but when we closely examine Moses' actions, we notice several mistakes. Clearly, Moses disobeyed a direct command from God. God had told Moses to speak to the rock, but Moses instead struck it with his staff. Previously, when God brought water from a rock, he had told Moses to strike it with a staff, but God's instructions were different in this case. God wanted Moses to have faith in him, especially after being so close for so long. Moses did not need to use force. All he needed to do was obey God and trust that he would fulfill his promise. Additionally, Moses took credit for bringing the water. He asked the people to gather at the rock and seemed to be attributing the miracle to himself and Aaron rather than attributing it to God. Moses did this publicly, and God could not let it go unpunished and expect the Israelites to understand his holiness. In 1 Corinthians 10:4, the rock that gave water is used as a symbol of Christ. Just as Christ was crucified once, unlike the other high priests who needed to offer sacrifices every day, he sacrificed for sins once for all when he offered himself. Moses speaking to the rock in Numbers 20 could have been interpreted as an image of prayer. Jesus was struck once and continues to provide living water to those who pray to him with faith. When Moses struck the rock in anger, he destroyed the biblical typology and indeed crucified Christ again. When the Lord instructed Moses to strike the rock in Exodus 17, he intended to establish an image of Christ as our Redeemer. The Bible repeatedly says in the Psalms and in Isaiah that Christ is our rock and cornerstone. He was struck for us and will bring streams of living water, namely salvation. Additionally, Hebrews says that Christ died once for all, and no other sacrifice for sins is needed. So the Lord intended for Moses to strike the rock in the desert only once in the Exodus 17 scene to represent Jesus' unique sacrifice to bring salvation. Thus, when Moses chose to strike the rock again, he broke the image painted in Exodus 17. If God had not corrected Moses' error, he would have been confused by the distorted image, concluding that Jesus, the rock, would have to be sacrificed repeatedly for our salvation. As a result, God rebuked Moses to ensure that we understood the image of the rock, preventing him from entering the promised land. During the process, the Lord created a new image to support a correct understanding of salvation, excluding Moses from the promised land. The Lord demonstrated that we cannot enter into salvation, which is the promised land, through the works of the law, namely Moses, but only through the work of Jesus, for example, through Joshua, which is the name Yeshua or Jesus. Moses' punishment for disobedience, pride, and the incorrect portrayal of Christ's sacrifice was severe. He was barred from entering the promised land. Despite this, we never see Moses complain about his punishment. Instead, he continues to lead the people faithfully and honor God. And Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is opposite Jericho. And the Lord showed him all the land, Gilead as far as Dan, all Naphtali, the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, the Negeb and the plain, that is the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zoar. And the Lord said to him, "This is the land of which I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to your offspring. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not go over there." So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord, and he buried him in the valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor. But no one knows the place of his burial to this day. Despite being punished for his lack of obedience, Moses died in faith and honor. Moses was honored as the only man buried by the Lord. However, a dramatic event occurred later in God's word at this location, but we'll get to that later in the video. The 30-day mourning period exceeded the normal mourning period of 7 days. Most of us do not like to say goodbye to those we care about. Separation is hard, whether in a school or a cemetery. We believe it is appropriate to cry as children of God, but there is no need for despair because we know we have pain here and the departed have no pain there. We may be struggling here, but the departed are not. We know the departed are at peace in God's presence at this time. Centuries later, we read in the Gospels that Moses spoke with Jesus on the top of one of the mountains, but he never entered Canaan in his earthly life. He was also buried on Mount Nebo, although not by his own people. In the New Testament, according to various commentators, God buried Moses in secret and without a gravestone to prevent the tomb from becoming a shrine or a place of worship. This seems plausible, given the Israelites' propensity for idolatry. Another mystery involves Jude, chapter 1, verse 9, where we learn that when Moses died, the archangel Michael disputed with the devil about the body of Moses. This story involves Moses and two other characters. The first is Satan. Satan is described in the Bible as an angelic enemy of God, and by extension, the enemy and opponent of those who follow God. Although everything God created was good, Satan chose to rebel against the Lord, and many other angels followed his rebellion. Satan tempted Eve to sin in the Garden of Eden, and Adam followed her in sin, plunging the whole human race into a curse. Portrayed as a serpent and a dragon in the Bible, Satan is a murderer and the father of lies. He promotes false doctrines and seeks to keep unbelievers in spiritual bondage. This is clearly indicated in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1, which says that in the latter times some will depart from the faith and follow deceiving spirits and teachings of demons. Regarding Satan, the Bible gives the following information. Satan is a personal being with a mind, feelings, and a choice, as seen in Job chapter 1. He is a created being and is not equivalent to God. Satan does not rule hell. Hell was created as a sentence for Satan and his demons. Neither does Satan live in hell, as the Bible describes how he can enter heaven and roam the earth. The devil can only do what God allows. Satan is not everywhere, but oversees a host of demons called powers of this dark world and spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. He uses this network to try and deceive people, working vigorously to deny the effect of God's word on people's hearts and blind the minds of those who do not believe, so they cannot understand the gospel. The second character is the archangel Michael. Michael, along with Gabriel, is probably the most well-known angelic being in the Bible. We know Michael is an archangel, but what exactly does that imply? What has he accomplished? What are his duties, and how does he fit into God's heavenly army? Michael is the name of the archangel, a name that raises the question, who is like God? Many Jewish and non-Jewish parents who name their sons Michael have no idea what the name means. Jude makes no further mention of this passing reference, which has sparked debate among biblical scholars. We do not know when this angelic debate occurred, but it was most likely during Moses' burial. We also do not understand why the devil and Michael are arguing about the body. The devil was standing on the other side of Moses when the angel arrived. The devil claimed ownership of this man because he had murdered an Egyptian, but the archangel Michael said to the devil, "The Lord rebuke you." And the angel buried Moses. It was an incredible end to an incredible life. Before crossing the Jordan, the people mourned him for a month. Despite the mysteries surrounding Moses' death and burial, we know some facts. One of them is that God's word is true and his prophecies always come to pass. Another is that sin brings discipline from God and no one is immune. Furthermore, God does not always explain mysteries in his word, but here is the truth. Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. Psalm 116:15. There is also another lesson in Jude. Likewise, these ungodly people by their dreams defile their own bodies, reject authority, and slander celestial beings. But even the archangel Michael, when he was disputing with the devil about the body of Moses, did not dare to bring a slanderous accusation against him, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." Nevertheless, these people slander what they do not understand, and the very things they do understand by instinct, as irrational animals do, will destroy them. Woe to them! They have taken the way of Cain. They have rushed for profit into Balaam's error. They have been destroyed in Korah's rebellion. The scriptures teach us to obey legitimate authorities established over us, but false teachers deny authority in this matter. They were not accountable to anyone but themselves. Furthermore, the group slandered glorious beings. Jude describes this with a narrative of dispute over Moses' body between the archangel and the devil. Michael refused to make a slanderous condemnation against Satan, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." False teachers, on the other hand, did not understand how spiritual warfare works. They lived in a world of dreams, disconnected from spiritual reality. They blasphemed instead of invoking the Lord, as Michael did. Why did they not understand that Satan should not be taken lightly? Instead, they were like irrational animals operating only on instinct. Jude compares them to Cain, who offered a bloodless sacrifice, to Balaam, who ministered only for money, and to Korah, who rejected the authority of God's word, rebelling against spiritual authority. All of them were judged.